Something happened this week that no one in the legacy media is willing to call by its real name. In the span of just 7 days, Donald Trump has changed the world order in ways that most can't even begin to fathom. A new superpower alliance is rising from the Mediterranean to the Pacific, and it's literally changing everything, most especially the future of NATO. Stick with me to the very end of this video, because what I'm about to show you is not just a foreign policy story. It's the most important civilizational story of the 21st century, and almost nobody is covering it. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your patron professor, enjoying yet another absolutely extraordinary day in the American Golden Age that you made possible back in November 2024. So if you want a front row seat as we watch Donald Trump reshape the entire global order with his own two hands, well, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. All right, let's dive right in here, gang. The Earth realigning ramifications from the Trump-Xi summit continue to resonate throughout the rising world order. As many of you know, on May 14th, Donald Trump landed in Beijing for a state visit that Chinese state media immediately called historic, and they weren't wrong. The last time an American president visited Beijing on a state visit of this magnitude was nearly a decade ago. Just so happens it was Trump then as well in his first term. The pomp was extraordinary. Xi Jinping personally escorted Trump to the Temple of Heaven, one of the most symbolically charged locations in all of Chinese culture. This was not a routine diplomatic meeting. This was a carefully staged signal to the entire world. China and America are talking at the highest possible level as the two great civilizationalist powers on the planet. Now, Trump came back with a treasure trove of commitments. China agreed to purchase 200 Boeing aircraft, more than the 150 that analysts had expected. NVIDIA received U.S. government approval to sell its H200 artificial intelligence chips to major Chinese tech firms, a massive reversal of the chip export ban that had been a centerpiece of the previous administration's China policy. Trump told Fox News that China had agreed to purchase American oil to lessen their dependence and reliance on Iran. Xi and Trump agreed to a 3-year strategic stability framework, which is Beijing's way of trying to lock in the current détente as the structural baseline for U.S.-China relations going forward for the foreseeable future. And Xi accepted Trump's invitation to visit the United States on September 24th before the 1-year trade truce expires in October. But what's so absolutely key here is that this summit established the two nations, United States and China, as the unparalleled civilizational giants on Earth, with the leverage clearly shifting towards the United States. And that's because of the new regional order that we're seeing emerge starting in the Middle East. Now, remember, earlier this week, Trump had ordered the United States military to prepare a very major attack, that's what he called it, on Iran, scheduled for Tuesday. Not a limited strike, not a targeted operation, a full large-scale assault. Then, within a 24-hour window, he received 3 separate phone calls from the Emir of Qatar, the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed. All 3 called with the same message. According to Axios, give negotiations a chance. Give it a little more time while we continue to work to contain Iran. Now, remember, these calls came at the same time it was revealed that Saudi Arabia and the UAE had launched a series of covert attacks against Iran. That was the first time that's happened ever in that region. And it was a very clear message, despite its covert nature, that there is a new sheriff in town. And that sheriff is the Abraham Accords. Iran will, one way or the other, bow to Israeli muscle and Arab money. And the alliance between Israel and the Sunni Arab Gulf states, brokered, of course, by the United States to deliberately box out Chinese influence in the Gulf, is now the new sheriff in the region. And what's so key to understand about the Abraham Accords is they represent the sort of embryonic architecture of a new regional superpower bloc. built on a shared Abrahamic lineage and a shared strategic interest, containing Iran, attracting Western investment, and building technological and economic prosperity throughout the Middle East. The Gulf states and Israel discovered that they had more in common as modernizing, innovation-driven economies than they had in conflict as ethnic and religious adversaries. And so when Trump backed off from the planned strike, what so many in the legacy media missed was that he was actually demonstrating in that moment something very, very sophisticated. He demonstrated that he has built, remember, it was Trump who brokered the Abraham Accords. He demonstrated that he has built genuine, deep, trust-based relationships with the most important leaders in the Middle East, forming a new superpower alliance that will guarantee peace and prosperity throughout the region. This is exactly how the Abraham Accords are supposed to function. Israel and the Gulf nations more or less calling the shots, especially in relation to Iran, with U.S. security guarantees to back them up. And Trump is allowing the Abraham Accords to work precisely as he envisioned. Now, at the very same time, behind the scenes, Pakistan has been serving as a mediating back channel, delivering a revised 14-point Iranian peace proposal to Washington. Iran's President Pezeshkian is publicly saying that dialogue is not surrender, which is significant because Iranian presidents don't say things like that unless they have some level of internal authorization to say them. And Trump himself has said this is a bit different from what we've got before. There's a very good chance that we can work something out here. We are, for the first time in this conflict, in a genuine diplomatic window. How long it stays open, nobody knows, but it's open now. And again, that was largely secured by the Abraham Accords countries functioning precisely as Trump envisioned. But this new superpower alliance isn't just happening with the Middle East. Another power is rising, a power in the East that Trump sees as critical to this new world order realignment, and the victim may be old world alliances that Trump now sees as totally obsolete. Wait until you see this. But first, you have got to go right now to turleytraining.com because we're living through a time when a lot of people are beginning to realize something important. The old economic system, the one that told you to work harder, grind longer, and depend on institutions that frankly don't have your best interests in mind, is starting to break down. And you see it everywhere: inflation, instability, and a growing sense that the system is increasingly designed for the benefit of a very small group at the top. And whenever we see moments like this historically, something interesting always happens. Ordinary people begin looking for ways to create independence from the system rather than depend on it. And that's why I want to invite you to a free training with someone I know personally, a good friend of mine named Ryan, who's been quietly building what he calls the perfect lifestyle business that takes advantage of the new hidden economy. What's fascinating about it is that it's probably not what you think of when you hear about online business, right? In fact, when he first explained it to me, I'll be honest, it sounded a little, weird. But then he showed me the results, and I immediately got excited because it's working so well right now in 2026. And the part that really caught my attention is that it takes him less than 30 minutes a day to actually run and operate, with no advertising to run, no social media marketing to worry about, no employees to hire, no inventory to buy, no websites to build. And you don't need any technical background to get started. So I asked Ryan to break this down for you step by step, and we're hosting a free private training where you can see exactly how this works, because this is about creating real independence at a time when more people are starting to question the system altogether. So if you want to see how this hidden economy works and decide if this is the right strategy for you, go to turleytraining.com and reserve your spot right now, because you already know the world is changing. More people are stepping outside the system, not by chance, but by choice. And this is one of those opportunities to do exactly that. Learn more at turleytraining.com. And now, connected to the Middle East alliance is a rising Indo-Pacific alliance being transformed right before our very eyes: Japan and India. Two of the world's most consequential civilizational powers are simultaneously breaking from their post-war constraints and stepping into full partnership with a resurgent Trumpian America. Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takeichi, the proud heir to Shinzo Abe's nationalist legacy and Japan's first female prime minister, has shattered the pacifist 1% GDP defense ceiling entirely, approving a record 9 trillion yen defense budget for fiscal year 2026, the 14th consecutive annual increase, while lifting the ban on lethal arms exports and deploying long-range counter-strike missile capabilities aimed squarely at Beijing and Pyongyang. India, meanwhile, just received a landmark $428 million U.S. defense package covering Apache attack helicopters and M777 ultralight howitzers, and accepted it without any demands that New Delhi take sides in the Iran war or abandon its strategic autonomy. That framing is deliberate. Trump is building an Indo-Pacific security architecture on the basis of mutual respect and shared interests, not ideological litmus tests, the exact formula that has historically worked with both nations. Together, Japan and India represent over $500 million, or $1.5 billion. What am I saying? They represent over 1.5 billion people on the planet. They represent two of the world's 5 largest economies and two civilizations that share one overriding strategic reality: a rising aggressive China on their doorsteps. Trump is not creating that shared interest. He's simply finally organizing it into a coherent alliance. And the result is the most powerful military coalition in the Indo-Pacific since the end of the Cold War. So now the question comes down to this. With this rising superpower alliance stretching all the way from the Mediterranean to the Pacific, made up of new and rising superpowers, what on earth are we to make of NATO and the old, disappearing, octogenarian, dying, decaying societies in Europe? While Trump was in Beijing securing deals, while Gulf leaders were calling him to pause the Iran war and enforce the new regional architecture, as both India and Japan continue to rise as major military forces aligned with the United States, the NATO alliance has been quietly but irreversibly fracturing. And it's fracturing specifically because of Iran. As you know, Spain closed its airspace to American military flights headed for the Middle East. Italy denied the U.S. permission to operate heavy bombers from Italian air bases. Britain and France refused to participate in Trump's proposed Strait of Hormuz blockade. NATO allies collectively said, "This is not our war, and we will not be compromised or conscripted into it." Trump's response was characteristically direct. "We've always been there for you, but you're not there for us." Trump called their refusal a stain on the alliance that will never disappear. Now, here is the profound question that strategic analysts are now openly asking, in language that would frankly have been considered unthinkable 5 years ago. Will the United States come to the aid of its NATO allies if they're attacked? That question, the foundational assumption of the entire post-World War II Atlantic order, is now genuinely in doubt. Not because Trump formally withdrew from NATO, but because the relationship has been so damaged by mutual distrust and divergent interests that the alliance really is functionally operating as two separate entities. So you've got this U.S.-led transactional security network in the Middle East and the Gulf going all the way into the Pacific. And then you got this European self-defense consortium that's actually rapidly rearming independently. If you don't know, NATO's defense spending is up 62% since 2020. Not necessarily because Europe agreed with Trump that they had to increase their spending or anything like that, but because Europe can no longer assume America will be there when they need it. And here's a civilizational insight that ties all three threads together, the Pacific, the Gulf, and Brussels, into a single coherent picture. The liberal international order that the United States built and maintained from 1945 to roughly 2016, when Trump was first elected, was held together by one central promise: that America's alliances were based on shared values, not necessarily shared interests. So democracies stood together. The free world was a community, not a coalition of the convenient. Donald Trump has rejected that premise entirely, not as a strategic error, but as a deliberate, considered choice. He's replacing the values-based order with a transactions-based order, where relationships are built on deals, on respect, on results, and on networked, multipolar, civilizational alliances, where the Emir of Qatar gets a phone call returned because he asked for one respectfully, where Xi Jinping gets a state visit because he signed a trade truce, where European allies who refuse to fight get thrown to the back seat. This is a completely different theory of American power, and it's the most radical foreign policy transformation since the founding of NATO itself. The old order is over. The world that built it no longer exists. Trump isn't just remaking our nation. He is indeed, very effectively, remaking the world.